Hello, class. Over the years, I've noticed that some students get simplifying, multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, and solving all mixed up. So I thought I would do this quick video to help you remember the differences between all those things. We'll start with simplifying. It's very short process. You factor everything, then you cancel out factors that are common in the numerator and the denominator. Here's an example. So we begin by factoring everything. We do have a common factor, x minus 3, in both the top and the bottom. We're going to cancel that out. There is no more simplification that can be done, so we're done, and this is our answer. What about multiplying and dividing? Those are two sides of the same coin. By that, I mean they have many steps in common. You begin both by factoring everything. With multiplication, at this point, you cancel out common factors and multiply across the numerator and the denominator. With division, there is an extra step. You leave the first expression as is. You change the division to multiplication. You flip the second expression, and at that point, you have a multiplication problem. So you cancel out common factors and multiply across the numerator and the denominator. Let's look at an example. Now, here are two examples. I wanted you to see multiplication and division side by side. In both cases, we begin by factoring everything, and I've done that here. Now, division has an extra step. We keep it, change it, flip it. We keep the first expression as is. You see that here. We change the division to multiplication, and we flip the second expression. All right. At this point, we have two multiplication problems, so we can treat them the same. We're going to cancel out common terms and then multiply across the top and bottom. Now, I want to stop here a moment and note. You will note that I did not multiply through for the denominators. You never do that when you're dealing with rational applications and operations. You always leave the denominator factored. Make sure you make a note of that and do that on any homework, quizzes, or tests. Yes, and our answer here for the division problem could be further simplified, and so I've done that here. I didn't want to forget to let you know that. Now, what about adding and subtracting? Well, in this case, we factor only the denominator, and then we use those factors to find the least common denominator, or the LCD. We multiply the top and bottom of every expression by whatever you don't have in the denominator to make the LCD. And then we add or subtract across the top, combining like terms as we go. We leave the denominator factored. Let's look at an example of this. Now, I've given you an example that has both addition and subtraction. So we begin by factoring the denominators. We have x minus 6, x plus 2, and 5. That makes up our LCD. Now, in the first expression, I am missing x plus 2. So I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by x plus 2. In the second expression, I'm missing 5 and x minus 6. So I multiply both top and bottom by 5 and x plus 6. And then in the third expression, I'm missing just the 5. So I multiply top and bottom by 5. At this point, I can combine all the terms in the numerators and do addition or subtraction, whatever I'm being asked to do. So first, I do multiply together 2x3 and x plus 2, and this is what I get. At that point, I combine like terms. I have 2x squared. I have 7x plus 15x, that's 22x. And I have 6 minus 90 minus 5, that's 89, and this is my answer. Again, you'll notice that I did the indicated operations in the numerators, but left the denominator factored. All right, now last, let's look at solving. In solving, we also factor the denominator only. Then we also find the least common denominator. But in solving, we are going to clear the fraction so that we can easily solve for the variable. So we're going to multiply both sides of the equation, every term in both sides of the equation, by the LCD to clear the fraction. At that point, I should have a pretty easy equation to solve, but make sure you check your answer. You can detect mistakes if you made any, and also sometimes you have extraneous solutions. So you definitely want to check for that. Now let's look at an example. Okay, so we're going to solve this rational equation. So the first thing I want to do is factor my denominators. So I do that here. And I see that my least common denominator is x minus 6 and x plus 2. Now in the first expression, I'm missing x plus 2. So back up. I'm getting confusing myself. I'm going to multiply everything on both sides of the equation by the least common denominator to clear the fraction. Now I did this in pieces so that hopefully it's very clear to you what's going on. I have 2 divided by x minus 6. I'm going to multiply that by the least common denominator. When I do that, x minus 6 cancels out. So I'm left with 2 times x plus 2. And I no longer have a fraction. Now I'm going to deal with 7 over x plus 2. When I multiply that by the least common denominator, x plus 2 cancels out. And I'm left with 7 times x minus 6. And on the other side of the equation, because I have to do everything on both sides of the equation, when I multiply 4x over 2 over x minus 6 times x plus 2 by the least common denominator, the whole thing cancels out. And I'm left with 4x plus 2. At this point, I have a pretty easy one variable equation to solve. So don't stop here. Here's your equation. You're going to solve for x, and you're not going to forget to check your answers, are you? Okay, so here we are. We're going to solve for x. I'm going to combine like terms and then go ahead and isolate x. So I have 9x minus 38 on one side and 4x plus 2. I subtract 4 from both sides to give me 5x minus 38 is equal to 2. I add 38 to both sides, and then I divide both sides by x, and I get x equal 8. Now I did check this. I don't show that work in this video, but I did check this, and the answer is correct. But don't forget to check your answers. If you made a mistake, you want to know it, you will likely be able to find it, and you will be able to identify extraneous answers or equations that have no solutions. Now here's a handy chart. You may want to copy this down and use it to study that compares the differences between simplifying, multiplying, dividing, adding and subtracting, and solving. Now, I know that some of you are probably still confused about how to find the least common denominator. If that's you, go look up my video on YouTube, or it's posted on Classroom with this assignment. That is it, folks. Enjoy the rest of your long weekend.